My name is Roxanne, 34, and I've been teaching high school art for over a decade now. My husband James and I had been married for 8 years, living what I thought was our dream life. My younger sister Melanie had always been my best friend growing up. Last Thanksgiving, I was hosting dinner at our home when I went down to the basement storage room for holiday decorations. What I discovered there changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, what I did after finding them will show you exactly how to take back your power. I used to think I had the perfect life. My home in suburban Boston was everything I'd dreamed of. A charming colonial with a fenced yard and a studio space where I could work on my art when I wasn't teaching. James and I met during our senior year of college. I was cramming for finals at the campus coffee shop, completely absorbed in my art history textbook, when he accidentally spilled his latte across my notes. Instead of getting upset, I laughed at the artistic coffee stains creating abstract patterns across my meticulously written pages. He offered to buy me dinner as an apology, and from that moment we were inseparable. Our wedding was a dream come true, a beautiful ceremony by the lake on my parents' property. The fall leaves created a natural canvas of reds and golds against the blue water. Everyone commented on how perfect we were together. James with his quiet intelligence and me with my creative spirit. We complemented each other so well, at least that's what I thought. The only cloud in our otherwise perfect life was our struggle with infertility. For 3 years we'd been trying to have a baby. Month after month of disappointment took its toll on both of us. The doctors couldn't find anything specifically wrong, just that unexplained infertility that affects so many couples. Each negative pregnancy test felt like another tiny fracture in my heart. James would hold me while I cried, assuring me that we'd find a way to build our family somehow. Through all of this, my relationship with Melanie had been my rock. Only 3 years younger than me, we'd always been close despite our differences. Growing up, she was always labeled the pretty sister, tall and blonde like our mother, while I took after our father's side with my auburn hair and freckled complexion. People would sometimes express surprise that we were related, but I never resented the comparisons. Our bond was too strong for petty jealousy. When Melanie met Derek during her graduate program, I was thrilled for her. He was everything she deserved, kind, brilliant, and completely devoted to her. As a pediatrician, Derek had this natural warmth that made everyone around him feel comfortable. Their wedding 2 years ago was extravagant. Melanie always did have expensive taste, and I'd thrown myself into helping plan every detail. I wanted her day to be perfect, and it was. After they married, our family settled into a comfortable routine. Sunday dinners at our parents' house became a tradition none of us would miss. Mom would cook her famous roast, Dad would tell the same old stories that somehow never got old, and the four of us, James, Derek, Melanie, and I, would laugh and talk about our week. Those dinners were sacred to me, the one constant I could count on when the rest of life felt uncertain. When the fertility treatments weren't working, James and I started discussing adoption. The process was daunting. Home studies, background checks, waiting lists. But the possibility of finally becoming parents gave us new hope. We'd just completed our initial paperwork and were waiting for our first home visit when Thanksgiving rolled around. That year, I insisted on hosting Thanksgiving at our house. We'd purchased it just 8 months earlier, and I was eager to fill it with family and create new memories. I spent weeks planning the menu, buying new table linens, and making everything perfect. This house represented our fresh start, a place where we might finally become parents, and I wanted our first holiday there to be special. Looking back, I should have seen the signs that something was terribly wrong in my perfect life, but when you trust completely, you become blind to the betrayal hiding in plain sight. The first hint that something wasn't right came about 3 months before Thanksgiving. James started working late more often than usual. His job as an IT consultant had always required some evening hours, but suddenly it was happening 3 or 4 nights a week. When he'd come home, he'd be distant, checking his phone constantly and taking calls in another room. I asked him about it once, and he explained that they'd taken on a major new client with offices in different time zones. "The project is huge, Roxy," he said using the nickname only he called me. "If we pull this off, there might be a promotion in it for me. Maybe enough for us to afford private adoption if we need to go that route." How could I argue with that? He was working hard for our future family. Still, something felt off. James had always been an open book with me, leaving his phone around without worry, sharing funny texts from colleagues. Now his phone was password protected and he kept it with him constantly. One night I woke up around 2 a.m. and found his side of the bed empty. I walked downstairs to find him in the kitchen furiously texting someone. When he saw me, he quickly put the phone down. "Just work stuff," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Jenkins in Singapore needs some numbers before their day starts." I nodded and went back to bed, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. Around the same time, Melanie started showing up at our house more frequently. She'd drop by unannounced, always with some small gift or reason. A book on adoption she thought might help us. A special tea that was supposed to help with stress. Information about a new fertility clinic she'd heard about from one of Derek's colleagues. "I just worry about you," she'd say, wrapping her arms around me. "This whole baby journey has been so hard on you. I want to help however I can." I appreciated her concern, but something about her increased presence felt strange. Sometimes she'd arrive just minutes before James got home from work, as though she knew his schedule better than I did. Once she even asked if she could use our guest bathroom to shower after her gym session before heading home. It seemed odd. Her house was only 15 minutes away, but I didn't question it. The incident that should have set off alarm bells happened about 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I'd left school early after the principal canceled our faculty meeting. I pulled into our driveway around 3:30, surprised to see Melanie's car parked on the street. Even more surprising was seeing her rushing out our front door looking flushed and flustered. "Roxanne," she exclaimed, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me. I thought you had your meeting today." "It got canceled," I said, watching her curiously. "What brings you by?" She held up a folder. "I found some resources about adoption agencies that Derek heard about through the hospital. I wanted to drop them off for you to look at." I thanked her and went inside to find James in the kitchen opening a beer. His hair was slightly disheveled and he seemed startled to see me. "Hey, you're home early?" he said, his voice just a bit too casual. "I just got here myself. Decided to wrap up some work from home." But his car had been in the garage, and when I touched the hood later, it was completely cool. He'd been home for a while. That evening I called my best friend Tara and shared my concerns. We'd been friends since middle school, and she knew me better than almost anyone. "Do you think something could be going on between them?" she asked carefully. "Between who?" I replied, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Between James and Melanie," she said gently. "The timing of her visits, his late nights, both of them acting weird." I shut her down immediately. "That's ridiculous. James would never cheat on me, especially not with my sister. And Melanie adores Derek. They're practically still newlyweds." Tara backed off, but her question lingered in my mind. I pushed it away, ashamed for even entertaining such a terrible thought. These were the two people I trusted most in the world. My husband, my sister. They would never betray me like that. I convinced myself I was being paranoid, stressed from the adoption process and years of fertility disappointments. Little did I know my intuition was screaming the truth I wasn't ready to hear. Thanksgiving morning arrived, bringing with it a flurry of activity. I was up before dawn, putting the turkey in the oven and prepping all the sides. James offered to help, which was unusual. Cooking had never been his thing. I assigned him simple tasks like peeling potatoes and setting the table, but he kept disappearing to check emails or make a quick call. Each time he returned, he seemed slightly on edge, his eyes darting to the clock too frequently. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Melanie stood on our porch with a bottle of wine and a store-bought pie, looking stunning as always, in a fitted sweater dress that accentuated her figure. I noticed she'd done her makeup more elaborately than our usual family gatherings required. "Where's Derek?" I asked, looking past her to the empty driveway. "He got called in for an emergency at the hospital," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. A patient of his came in with some complications. He'll join us as soon as he can. I invited her in, and the moment she saw James in the kitchen, something passed between them, a look so brief I almost missed it. They seemed to be actively avoiding eye contact after that in a way that felt forced and unnatural. "Melanie, would you mind helping James finish setting the table while I check on the turkey?" I asked, wanting to observe them together. "Sure," she replied, her voice a bit too high. "Happy to help." From the kitchen, I watched them through the pass-through window. They moved around each other with an awareness that felt intimate, somehow maintaining a careful distance that seemed calculated. Once, when James handed her the stack of napkins, their fingers brushed, and I saw her cheeks flush pink. My parents arrived shortly after, bringing additional side dishes and their usual cheerful energy. Dad immediately poured drinks for everyone, while Mom inspected my turkey with approving nods. "Smells divine honey," she said. "You've turned into quite the chef." We settled in the living room with appetizers, and the conversation flowed easily enough on the surface, until Mom brought up the subject of children. "So how's the adoption process going?" she asked, dipping a cracker into the spinach dip. "Any news?" James shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "We're still in the early stages. Lots of paperwork, background checks. It could be a long wait." "Well, at least you two have each other while you wait," Mom said. Then she turned to Melanie. "And when are you and Derek going to give us grandchildren? You two make such a beautiful couple. Those babies would be gorgeous." I didn't miss the way Melanie's smile faltered, or how James suddenly became very interested in his drink. "We're focusing on Derek's career right now," Melanie said. "Maybe in a year or two." Later, when I was mashing potatoes in the kitchen, Melanie came in with empty glasses for a refill. She leaned against the counter, watching me work. "You know," she said casually, "I read that adoption can be really stressful on marriages. You and James should plan a weekend getaway, reconnect a little. It might help." I looked up, surprised by her comment. "We're doing fine, Mel. Thanks for the concern." "I just noticed things," she continued. "The way he seems distant sometimes. Men need attention, Roxy. If they don't get it at home." She left the sentence hanging, and something cold settled in my stomach. Before I could respond, she grabbed the refilled glasses and returned to the living room. Throughout the afternoon, I became increasingly aware of James and Melanie's disappearing acts. James would excuse himself to check the football score or take a quick work call. Melanie would need to freshen up or get something from her car. Their absences never quite overlapped, but they were close enough to make me wonder. When Derek finally arrived around 4 o'clock, he looked genuinely harried, his hair windblown and tie askew. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing Melanie's cheek. "Had a patient with a severe asthma attack. Couldn't leave until I was sure she was stable." I watched Melanie's reaction carefully. She seemed almost disappointed by his arrival, though she covered it quickly with a bright smile. Dinner itself was a masterpiece of false normalcy. We passed dishes, complimented the food, and discussed safe topics like Dad's golf game and Mom's book club. Under the surface, though, currents of tension swirled. I caught James staring at Melanie when he thought no one was looking. I noticed how she'd touch her neck when responding to something he said. Small gestures that might mean nothing, or everything. As we finished the pumpkin pie, I stood and announced that I wanted to bring up some holiday decorations from the basement storage room, since everyone was there to help decorate. "I'll be right back," I said. "I'm going to grab the boxes of ornaments and garlands." No one offered to help. As I left the dining room, I glanced back to see James checking his watch, and Melanie whispering something to Derek about helping clear the table. I had no idea that I was about to discover the truth that would shatter my perfect life into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The basement stairs creaked under my feet as I descended, one hand trailing along the wooden railing. Our house was old with character, as the real estate agent had called it, and the basement still had that slightly musty smell despite our renovations. The main area was finished with a small entertainment space and laundry room, but the storage area was a separate room in the back with concrete floors and exposed beams. As I approached the storage room door, I heard muffled voices coming from inside. Frowning, I paused. Who would be in our storage room? Everyone was supposed to be upstairs finishing dessert. I took another step closer, and the voices became more distinct. One male, one female, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I recognized them immediately. My husband. My sister. Something inside me already knew what I would find, but my conscious mind refused to accept it until I saw it with my own eyes. I turned the knob slowly and pushed the door open. There they were. James had Melanie pressed against the shelving unit where we kept our Christmas decorations, his hands on her waist, her arms around his neck. Her lipstick was smudged, his shirt partially unbuttoned. When the door swung open, they froze like deer in headlights, caught in the midst of their betrayal under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Time seemed to stop. I stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak, as the reality of what I was seeing crashed over me in waves. My husband and my sister. The two people I trusted most in the world, betraying me in the most painful way possible in my own home during a family holiday. Melanie was the first to recover, pushing James away and straightening her dress. "Roxanne, it's not what it looks like," she said, the most cliched line in the history of being caught. James ran his hand through his hair, his face pale. "Roxy, this just happened. I don't know what to say. We didn't mean for what?" I finally found my voice, though it sounded foreign to my ears, calm in a way I didn't feel. "Didn't mean for me to find out. How long has this been going on?" They exchanged a guilty look that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was an affair. In my house, behind my back, while I was upstairs making Thanksgiving dinner for our family. I felt a strange sensation in my chest, like my heart was simultaneously freezing and burning. The room tilted slightly and I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. 8 years of marriage. 31 years of sisterhood. All built on lies. "Roxanne, please." Melanie stepped toward me, tears forming in her eyes. "Let me explain." I didn't want her explanations. I didn't want to hear how it started or why. In that moment, with perfect clarity, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I stepped backward out of the doorway, pulled the heavy storage room door closed, and turned the exterior deadbolt lock. The pounding started immediately, along with their muffled pleas. James calling my name, Melanie begging me to open the door. I stood there for a moment, listening to their panicked voices, feeling nothing but a strange, detached calm. I looked at my phone in my hand, having grabbed it to use as a flashlight in the dim basement. Without hesitation, I turned and walked back toward the stairs, their continued banging and shouting fading behind me. My mind was crystal clear as I climbed the steps back to the main floor. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was simply executing the most logical next step. The people upstairs, my parents Derek, they deserved to know the truth just as much as I did. And I knew exactly how to deliver it. When I reached the top of the basement stairs, I paused for a moment to collect myself. I could hear my parents chatting in the living room, the football game playing in the background. In the kitchen, I found Derek rinsing dessert plates and loading them into the dishwasher. His sleeves were rolled up, and he was humming softly to himself, completely unaware that his world was about to implode alongside mine. "Derek," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Could you help me with something in the basement? I need an extra pair of hands." He looked up with a friendly smile. "Sure, Roxanne. The dishes can wait." As we walked toward the basement door, my mother called out from the living room. "Do you need help with the decorations, sweetheart?" "No thanks, Mom," I replied. "Derek and I have got it covered." Derek followed me down the basement stairs, making small talk about the dinner and how delicious everything had been. I nodded mechanically, leading him toward the back of the basement. "Where are James and Melanie?" he asked, noticing their absence. "That's what I need your help with," I replied cryptically. As we approached the storage room door, the pounding had stopped, but I could hear urgent whispering from inside. Derek looked at me in confusion. "Why is the storage room locked? Is someone in there?" I met his eyes directly. "Derek, I need you to prepare yourself. What you're about to see is going to hurt, but you deserve the truth. We both do." His brow furrowed with concern. "Roxanne, what's going on?" Instead of answering, I reached for the deadbolt and turned it, then stepped back, allowing Derek to be the one to open the door. The heavy door swung open slowly. Inside, James and Melanie had clearly been trying to make themselves presentable, but the evidence of their encounter was still visible. His misaligned buttons, her wrinkled dress, both of their guilty, frightened expressions. Derek stood frozen in the doorway, his brain processing what his eyes were seeing. The silence lasted only seconds before he exploded. "What the hell is this?" he roared, looking between his wife and my husband. "Melanie, what are you doing down here with him?" Melanie stepped forward, her hands outstretched pleadingly. "Derek, please, I can explain. It's not—" "Don't you dare say it's not what it looks like," I interrupted coldly. "I found them kissing Derek. Their clothes were disheveled. There's no innocent explanation." James tried to approach me, but I backed away. "Roxy, please. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. We need to talk about this." "Find out what exactly?" Derek demanded, his physician's composure completely shattered. "How long has this been going on?" James and Melanie exchanged a look, and it was that silent communication between them, that obvious familiarity, that broke something inside me. "Answer him," I said. "How long have you two been sleeping together behind our backs?" Melanie began to cry, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "It started about 4 months ago," she admitted in a small voice. "It was just supposed to be one time. We never meant for it to continue, but 4 months." Derek's voice was hollow with disbelief. "All those times you said you were working late or meeting friends. All those times you were in my house when I wasn't home." I added, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You've been meeting here, haven't you? In my home. In my bed." James couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. They had been betraying us in the most intimate way possible in the sanctuary of my own home. The sound of footsteps on the basement stairs broke through the tense confrontation. My mother's voice called down, "Is everything all right down there?" We heard shouting. Moments later, both my parents appeared at the storage room door, taking in the scene with confused expressions. "What's going on?" my father asked, looking between the four of us. Derek laughed bitterly. "Why don't you ask your daughter, not this one?" He gestured to me. "The other one. The one who's been sleeping with her sister's husband for the past 4 months." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Melanie, James, is this true?" The silence that followed was damning. Melanie finally broke it, her voice thick with tears. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. We never meant for this to happen. It just did." "Things don't just happen," I said, finding my voice again. "You make choices. Both of you made the choice to betray the people who loved and trusted you, over and over again." My father looked stunned, his face ashen as he grappled with the revelation. My mother reached for me, but I stepped away from her touch. "Roxanne, sweetheart," she began. "Don't," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "I can't do this right now. I need everyone to leave. All of you. I want you out of my house." "Roxy, please," James tried once more. "Let me stay. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, suddenly exhausted. "You've been having an affair with my sister in our home while I was at work. What could you possibly say that would make that okay?" Derek turned to Melanie. His expression hardened. "Get your things. We're leaving, now." "Derek, please," she begged, reaching for his arm. He jerked away from her touch as if burned. "Don't. Just don't. I can't even look at you right now." My parents stood awkwardly, clearly torn between their two daughters. My mother kept glancing between Melanie and me, her expression devastated. "Both of you," I said to my parents. "Please go. I need to be alone." They nodded reluctantly, my father placing a gentle hand on my shoulder before leading my mother upstairs. Derek followed them without another glance at Melanie, who trailed behind him, still tearfully trying to explain. James was the last to leave the basement. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking back at me with an expression of misery. "I'll come back tomorrow to get some clothes. We should talk when you're calmer." "There's nothing to talk about," I repeated, crossing my arms over my chest. Just go. And finally, I was alone in the basement, surrounded by the holiday decorations I'd come down to retrieve. Cheerful reminders of family celebrations that now felt like a cruel joke. Only then, with no one to witness it, did I allow myself to sink to the floor and let the tears come. I don't remember much about that night after everyone left. I sat in the dark living room for hours, the remnants of Thanksgiving dinner still scattered across the dining table. My phone kept lighting up with texts and calls from James, Melanie, my parents. I ignored them all. The turkey I'd so carefully prepared sat congealing in its own fat, the pies, half-eaten wine glasses with lipstick marks still on the rims, the physical debris of my shattered family. Around midnight, I finally roused myself enough to store the leftovers. It was an automatic action, the kind you do when you're moving through shock. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in our bedroom, so I curled up on the couch with a throw blanket staring at the ceiling until dawn broke. The next morning, my phone showed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I scrolled through them without reading, then silenced my phone completely. I knew I would have to face reality eventually, but I needed time to process what had happened to figure out my next steps. Around 10, the doorbell rang. James stood on the porch looking like he hadn't slept at all. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. "I came to get some clothes," he said when I opened the door, "and to talk if you're willing." I stepped aside silently, allowing him to enter but not engaging. He went upstairs to our bedroom, while I waited in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. When he returned with a duffel bag, I finally spoke. "Where are you staying?" "At the Marriott downtown," he replied, setting the bag down. "Roxy, please can we talk about this? I know I've made a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" I interrupted, meeting his eyes for the first time. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk or missing a turn while driving. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices made day after day for months." He sank into a kitchen chair, running his hands through his hair. "You're right. I know you're right. I don't know how to explain what happened." "Try," I said coldly. "I think you owe me at least that much." James took a deep breath. "It started after the third failed IVF attempt. You were so devastated and I felt helpless. I couldn't fix it for you. Melanie came over one day when you were at work. She said she wanted to drop off some information about that new fertility clinic." I nodded, remembering. "Go on." "We started talking about how worried she was about you, about how the fertility treatments were affecting our marriage. One thing led to another." He trailed off, unable to meet my eyes. "It was just supposed to be that one time. We both felt terrible afterward. But then it happened again, and it became this thing between us." "This thing," I repeated flatly. "You mean an affair? With my sister? In our home? While I was working to support us and researching adoption agencies because I thought we were building a family together." James flinched at my words. "When you put it like that, how else is there to put it?" I stood up, my calm facade finally cracking. "You blamed our infertility issues. You're saying because I couldn't get pregnant. You decided to sleep with my sister, the fertility treatments that were affecting our marriage. Those were for U.S. James. For our future. A future I thought we both wanted." We do," he insisted, standing as well. "It wasn't about the baby thing, not really. It was, I don't know how to explain it. Melanie and we just connected in a way I wasn't expecting. It was just physical at first, but then—" "Stop," I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear about your connection with my sister. What I want to know is how you could look me in the eye every day, tell me you loved me, sleep beside me at night, all while betraying me in the most painful way possible." He had no answer for that. After a long silence, he picked up his duffel bag. "What happens now?" Now I call a lawyer," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "I want a divorce, James. I don't see any way back from this." "Don't say that," he pleaded. "We can work through this. Go to counseling. I'll end things with Melanie completely, I swear." I laughed bitterly. "You already should have ended things with her. The moment anything started between you two, you should have stopped it. But you didn't. You chose to continue day after day, week after week. You chose her over me, over our marriage repeatedly. Those choices have consequences. He tried once more, reaching for my hand, which I immediately withdrew. Roxanne, please. 8 years of marriage. Don't throw that away because of one mistake. 4 months of betrayal isn't one mistake, I replied. And I'm not the one who threw our marriage away. You did that the first time you kissed my sister. After he left, I finally checked my messages. Most were from James and Melanie, desperate apologies and pleas for forgiveness that I deleted without reading fully. My parents had called several times, leaving voicemails that ranged from shocked to concerned to mildly defensive of Melanie. She made a terrible mistake, honey, my mother said in her latest message. But she's still your sister. Family is family. That one I deleted with particular venom. Family doesn't betray family. Not like this. The only message I listened to completely was from Derek. His voice was raw but controlled. Roxanne, it's Derek. I wanted to thank you for having the courage to show me the truth yesterday. I've moved into a hotel for now. If you want to talk or just sit in silence with someone who understands exactly what you're going through, call me. Otherwise, I respect your need for space. Take care of yourself. That weekend passed in a blur. I called in sick to work on Monday, something I rarely did, and spent the day researching divorce attorneys. By Tuesday, I'd scheduled a consultation and started gathering financial documents. My principal was understanding when I requested the rest of the week off, especially when I gave him a vague explanation about a family crisis. The social fallout began almost immediately. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and extended family who had somehow already heard the news. Some offered support, others sought gossip, and a few, particularly Melanie's friends, suggested I was overreacting. Marriages go through rough patches, wrote one of her college roommates. You should at least try counseling before throwing in the towel. I blocked her number without responding. My parents continued their campaign of attempted reconciliation, suggesting a family meeting to clear the air. I declined, firmly informing them that while I wasn't cutting them out of my life, I would not be attending any gatherings where Melanie was present. She's devastated, my mother insisted during one call. Derek's talking about divorce, too. She's lost everything because of one terrible lapse in judgment. A 4-month affair isn't a lapse in judgment, I replied, my patience wearing thin. And she didn't lose everything. She threw it away. There's a difference. After a week of screening calls and hiding in my house, I finally agreed to meet Derek for coffee at a neutral location. We chose a small cafe halfway between our homes, sitting at a corner table with matching expressions of exhaustion. You look about how I feel, he said, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Right back at you, I replied, stirring my latte absently. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both understanding that words were inadequate for what we were experiencing. Finally, Derek spoke. I filed the paperwork yesterday, he said quietly. My lawyer says it should be straightforward since we don't have kids or much shared property yet. I nodded. I have my first official appointment tomorrow. James keeps trying to convince me to reconsider. Derek's expression hardened. Melanie, too. She showed up at the hospital yesterday, causing a scene in the pediatric ward. I had to have security escort her out. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely meaning it. He shook his head. Don't apologize. You're the one person in this mess who has nothing to apologize for. He paused, studying me. How are you really doing with all this? I considered the question carefully. I'm functioning. Some moments are clearer than others. The hardest part isn't even losing James. It's losing Melanie. She's been my sister, my best friend, my confidant for my entire life. That betrayal cuts deeper somehow. Derek nodded in understanding. I keep thinking about all the times she said she was working late or meeting girlfriends. All the lies, the deception. How many dinners did we all have together where they were secretly seeing each other? How did they sit across from us carrying on conversations while hiding something like that? That's what I can't get past, I agreed. The calculated deception. the deliberate choice to keep hurting us day after day. We talked for nearly 3 hours, comparing notes on our spouses' excuses and apologies, sharing our anger and grief with the only other person who truly understood the unique pain we were experiencing. When we finally parted, I felt marginally lighter, as if sharing the burden had made it slightly more bearable. The hardest blow came the following week when I received an email from the adoption agency. Our application process was on hold pending resolution of our change in marital status. The family we had hoped to build was yet another casualty of James and Melanie's selfishness. Sitting alone in the house we had bought together, looking at the nursery, we had tentatively started planning. I finally allowed myself to grieve not just for the marriage I had lost, but for the future that had been stolen from me. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, I found myself in a one-bedroom apartment across town. The divorce had been finalized with surprising efficiency. James hadn't contested anything, perhaps out of guilt. I'd sold our house, unable to live with the memories it contained, and used my portion of the proceeds to start fresh. My new place was small, but filled with light. I'd decorated it entirely to my own taste, bold colors and eclectic art pieces that James would have found too chaotic. My therapy journey had been challenging, but essential. Dr. Harlow. My therapist had guided me through the stages of grief with patience and wisdom. Trust is like a mirror, she told me during one particularly difficult session. Once it's broken, you can glue it back together, but you'll always see the cracks in the reflection. I'd struggled most with the question of why. Why my sister? Why my husband? Why me? The answer, I eventually realized, wasn't about me at all. Their choices reflected their own weaknesses and flaws, not any failure on my part. The hardest lesson was learning to trust my instincts again. Looking back, the signs had been there. The late nights, the password-protected phone, Melanie's increased presence in our home. I'd ignored my gut feelings because I couldn't imagine the people I loved most would hurt me so deeply. Never again would I silence that inner voice. In the aftermath of betrayal, I'd reconnected with parts of myself I'd forgotten. I started painting again, not just the safe decorative pieces I created for my classroom, but raw emotional canvases that expressed my pain and gradual healing. I joined a hiking group, spending weekends exploring trails I'd never had time for, when my life revolved around fertility treatments and adoption paperwork. The most unexpected development in my healing journey was the community art program I started at a local youth center. Working with children in the foster system, I found purpose in channeling my maternal instincts into helping kids who needed creative outlets for their own trauma. Every Saturday, I taught art classes, watching with pride as withdrawn, mistrustful children gradually opened up through self-expression. My relationship with Derek had evolved into a genuine friendship. We met for coffee every few weeks, supporting each other through the rough patches. He'd accepted a position at a different hospital, wanting a fresh start away from colleagues who knew about the affair. "I had dinner with someone last week," he told me during our most recent meeting. "Just a colleague from the new hospital. Nothing serious, but it felt normal. Like maybe someday I might be able to trust someone again." I was genuinely happy for him. My own heart wasn't ready for dating yet, but I could envision a future where it might be. The hardest part of rebuilding my life was navigating family gatherings. My parents, while supportive of me, refused to exclude Melanie from family events. This meant I often declined invitations to birthdays and holidays, creating my own traditions instead. "She's still your sister," my mother would insist during our weekly phone calls. "People make mistakes. Forgiveness is part of healing." "Forgiveness might be," I would respond, "but reconciliation is different. I can forgive her for my own peace of mind without allowing her back into my life." Melanie had tried repeatedly to repair our relationship. She sent cards, gifts, even a 10-page handwritten letter explaining her actions and begging for another chance. I returned everything unopened. Perhaps someday I would be ready to hear her out, but that day hadn't arrived yet. James and Melanie's relationship had imploded within 3 months of our divorces, just as most affair relationships do when exposed to the harsh light of reality and consequences. Last I heard, James had moved to Chicago for a fresh start. Melanie was still in town working at the same real estate office, but our social circles never overlapped anymore. My first holiday season alone had been difficult but empowering. I hosted a Friendsgiving for other holiday orphans, colleagues, neighbors, and members of my hiking group who had nowhere else to go. We ate takeout Chinese food, watched bad movies, and created new traditions unburdened by painful memories. The turning point in my journey came unexpectedly. I was at an art supply store debating between brands of acrylic paint when I literally bumped carts with Andrew, a man I vaguely recognized from my college days. He'd been a year ahead of me in the art program, and we'd had a few classes together. "Roxanne?" he asked, his face lighting up with recognition. "Roxanne Miller from Professor Jacobs' advanced composition class." "It's Roxanne Stevens now," I corrected automatically, then paused. "Actually, it's Miller again." I went back to my maiden name. Something in my expression must have communicated the story behind that statement, because he nodded without pressing for details. Instead, he asked about my current art projects, and we ended up having coffee in the shop's small cafe. His genuine interest in my community art program and thoughtful questions about my own creative work were refreshing. No pity, no curiosity about my divorce, just authentic connection. We exchanged numbers, and though I wasn't ready for anything romantic, having a new friend who knew nothing about my past was surprisingly healing. It reminded me that I was more than the woman who was betrayed by her husband and sister. I was an artist, a teacher, a hiker, a friend, whole and complete on my own terms. As I approached the 1-year mark of my discovery in the storage room, I realized that while the pain hadn't disappeared entirely, it no longer defined me. The betrayal had broken me open, and in that breaking, I'd found strength I never knew I possessed. I'd learned to set boundaries, to honor my own needs, to build a life centered on my values rather than others' expectations. Forgiveness, I discovered, wasn't about excusing their actions or pretending the hurt never happened. It was about releasing the hold that anger had on me, freeing myself from the prison of bitterness. I forgave James and Melanie not for their sake but for mine, not to welcome them back into my life, but to fully claim my own. The wisdom I gained through this journey wasn't what I would have chosen, but it was mine nonetheless. I learned that trust once broken can be rebuilt, not necessarily with the same people, but within yourself. I learned that family isn't just about blood ties, but about who stands beside you when your world falls apart. Most importantly, I learned that my capacity for joy wasn't dependent on anyone else. It was always within me, waiting to be reclaimed. As I hung the final painting for my first solo art exhibition, a series titled Betrayal and Becoming that chronicled my emotional journey, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman who walked down those basement stairs a year ago wouldn't recognize the strong, confident person I had become. The betrayal that was meant to destroy me had instead transformed me, and for that unexpected gift, I was at last grateful. Have you ever experienced betrayal that ultimately led to personal growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most painful chapters in our lives become the most transformative. If you found my story meaningful, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing. Remember, it's not what happens to us, but how we respond that defines our journey. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own path to healing and wholeness.